Hi everybody, welcome to my next video. I'm sure you all are probably wondering, why the last two videos were, photos only, me talking. Well, I just wanted to, use those photos. Yeah, I was decent dressed. I mean, as a matter of fact, that last video where I was doing the rehash of the restaurants from 2011, I had on what I got on here. I just wanted to, include the photos from that. This video isn't a restaurant review, but it's one of the videos that I accidentally, deleted off my thumb drive that I use to transfer the videos from here at the house to the library, to where I can upload them to, YouTube at the library. But anyway, let's get on with why I'm shooting this video. Well, this video is going to be going on the Halloween 2011 playlist, even though, yeah, I know it's not 2011 anymore, it's actually 2012 as I shoot this video, because like I mentioned in the last video, today's January the 2nd of 2012. I can still get away with saying this, but, 10 short years ago, because it's not been quite 11 years, Halloween 2001, kind of created a bit of a stir with something that had happened a month before, the terrorist attacks of 9/11 of 01. I checked this book out from the library in October, and I've renewed it a couple times because I was trying to get this video and the other videos that I'm shooting after this shot with like a couple of the other books. But I saw this book at the library and wanted to talk about it. It's Death Makes a Holiday by David J. Skal. This, I was thumbing through this, and this actually had some stuff that I thought was like really interesting. Like different things, like death kicks up its heels here, like books and, photos of people and stuff, and different kind of like cartoons and everything like on here. But in this book, in Death Makes a Holiday, I was just thumbing through it, and an interesting chapter caught my eye, and it was about Halloween and the 9/11 terrorist attacks back in 01. And I don't know if you're offhand can remember back to 2001 and Halloween around then, but people after 9/11 happened were a bit on edge and jumpy and nervous and everything. Well, I mean, it's understandable. I mean, it was like I was watching All American Muslim tonight that I DVR'd on my DVR downstairs, because as I mentioned, we have cable. Well, they were talking about the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and I'm going to talk about this, with this, because this is relevant. The Muslims that are on that show, I mean, they seem like normal people to me. Very, very normal. They were talking about the fact that they feel that with, the terrorist attacks, that one lady said that they hijacked, the planes and their religion on that day. Well, I kind of agree with her, because it's like not all Muslims, and I do know a couple of, or I used to know a couple of really good Muslims, and as a matter of fact, one of them was from Saudi Arabia, and I gave her a big hug and a big kiss after that, and I was thrilled to death to see her when I saw her in Dillard's over in Crestview Hills a few years ago, and if I ever see her again, I'd hug her and kiss her again. I mean, I have no problem with the Muslim folks. I mean, they're just like anybody else. They're not all of them are extremists or terrorists, because one person, it's like one of them said, one bad apple ruins the bunch. I mean, it's the truth. But anyway, back to, this book, Death Makes a Holiday. People were, really, kind of on edge after what happened in Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and New York City. And who could blame them? Afterwards, and this is my thing that I remember the most about Halloween and September 11th and October of 2001. At the time, I was working at a hotel, and I won't say what hotel because, you know, I'm not going to say. But at the time, and this is one of my favorite stories, it involves my dad. My dad, at the time, had one of those cell phones. It was about this size. This is my cell phone here. But it was about this size, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe like this, you know, and like a little bit taller, that much longer. But he had one of those cell phones that, you know, you could call them internationally on, but it was still a local phone number for us. You know, it was like, you know, like a 513 something or other. Which 513, if you know your stuff, that's, you know, the Cincinnati area phone number. Well, that's what it was. It was, you know, a Cincinnati phone number. And, you know, here in Kentucky, you have to dial 513 in the phone number if you want to call across the river. Which is the same for them. They have to dial 859 to get here in Kentucky. Well, you know, it's been this way since about 2001. Well, at the time the terrorist thing happened, and this was getting up to, you know, it was on 9/11 as a matter of fact. And this is a funny Halloween story of overreacting, and then I'll get what it has to do with this book. I was working that night with another girl, and I was working 3 to 11 with her at p.m. 3 to 11 p.m. that evening. Well, you know, when we first got in, we were just crazy busy with, you know, check-ins and everything like that, because, you know, as you should remember, everybody was grounded, except for, of course, Air Force One. Well, you know, and it was everybody and their sister, you know, was, you know, grounded. Some of them were staying in hotels, you know, and I mean, we were slammed at the hotel for a couple hours that night. Well, after it had all calmed down and everybody figured out who was doing what, where, when, and everything, well, I decided I was going to call my dad, just because, well, I hadn't heard from him in like hours and hours, and I was getting worried because, you know, my dad was in Canada with some of his American co-workers trying, you know, to do a job up there. Well, when, you know, 9/11 happened, they closed the borders, as you should remember, and I'm like panicking, because I'm like, oh my god, you know, where's my dad? Is he okay? You know, what's going on? Because like I said, I hadn't heard from him in hours and hours, and by this point, you know, it was getting on to be about, I'd say probably 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, and I'm like, okay, well, I talked to him this afternoon, but that doesn't mean a hill of beans. I mean, you know, I don't know where he is and what he's doing. Well, I called him. I was so freaked out. I said, I remember my exact comment to him was, where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? And most importantly, are you okay? I remember saying that to him, and he said, kid, wait a minute. He said, repeat the questions again to me. And I answered, I said, my main question is, first and foremost, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. And I said, okay, where are you? And he said, I'm still in Canada. And I'm like, why? You know, I'm like, why? Where are you still in Canada? You know, what's the problem? You know, why haven't you gotten back across, you know, figured out how to get across the border? Because obviously all these hours later, I don't think there's going to be another terrorist attack. Nobody's flying, you know, and I don't think anybody's going to, you know, pull a Tim McVeigh and blow up a building or something with a car, you know. I think they were going for something on a more grandiose scale, considering what happened, you know, like involving airplanes. But, you know, Dad and his coworkers, his American coworkers, were trying to get the heck out of Dodge and Canada, for that matter, and get back here in America, stateside. My main thing was I was just glad Dad was okay, and, you know, he wasn't hurt or anything, but I really remember wishing my dad was back in the States that day. And it's like, I know I did a movie review on my movie review channel of mermaids. I remember feeling on 9/11 like Winona Ryder's character did from the movie Mermaids, when JFK had been shot back in the 1960s. Winona's character wanted her dad, and that's how I felt. I just really wanted my dad that day. I just wanted to hug him and kiss him, you know. I did. I just really wanted just to give my dad a big hug and a kiss. And just, I was just like, I just really want my dad. I just want to talk to him in person. Well, nothing against my mom, don't get me wrong. It's just, I knew Mom was fine because I'd seen her, before I left to go to work that day. So I was like, whatever. I know Mom's okay. I'm not worried about her, Because, she was at home, so I'm like, how much trouble is my mom going to get into at home? None. I mean, unless she, somebody breaks in the house and scares her to death, but, unlikely. Yeah, the funniest thing about Dad's cell phone, like I mentioned, is, he had one of those awesome plans where he could get a signal just about anywhere in the world outside of Harlan, Kentucky, and Mammoth Cave National Park. Well, and it was a local call to me. But what was funny is, at the hotel I worked at, there was a computer in the back that kept track of, who called what number from what room, like from where and when and how long they talked, like so many hours, minutes, and seconds, and like the number that was dialed and all this stuff. Well, as I mentioned, it was a local call. Well, when I got off the phone with talking with my dad, the girl that I was working with that night, asked me, well, you called, she's like, you called Canada? And I'm like, well, sort of. Not, well, yes I did, but not really. I sort of kind of did, but not really. Because like I said, it was a local 513 number. She accused me of making a long-distance phone call to Canada. Well, and like I said, you have to keep in mind that if I had called long distance, the computer in the back that kept track of the phone numbers would have made a printing noise and would have printed out a line saying, long distance phone call to such and such a number from such and such an extension for X length of time with charge of X, amount. The thing never printed. It just popped the number up on the screen and that was it, because it was a local call. I could have called a 1-800 number and it wouldn't have done anything, because it wouldn't have printed for something like that. But she didn't believe me. She was like, you called a long distance phone number, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you go back there and look. And I told her, I said, I was like, what the extension number is. I told her, go back there and look if you don't believe me. She did. And that's the funniest part. And all popped up was like, 513 phone number. And she comes stomping back around, and she's all pissed off, and she just looked at me like, I said, told you. I said, it didn't pop up a long distance number, did it? No. Like, really? She spent the rest of the night being mad at me. It's like I didn't even hear the printer go off in the back, and I'm like secretly laughing at her, and she was very indignant about the whole thing, and it was so funny. I mean, it is like, stuff like this, make like Halloween seem laughable, with her like being like, you call long distance and I'm gonna get you in trouble, and I'm like thinking, go right ahead, because it's like, all they have to do is, look it up and say, she called a local number, what is your problem? It's like, go right ahead. I mean, it's like, there are worse things though, like, for example, what David Scull says in this book about Death Makes a Holiday, there's a chapter in here that talks about the terrorist attacks, and, for Halloween of 2001, some monkey in, it wasn't a monkey, some person in Florida put powdered sugar in their Tootsie Rolls that they set out for Halloween, and it was like a bad taste because it was like, like they were emulating, the anthrax scare, and it just made like this whole big stink out of, that, it was like anthrax. That was inappropriate. I mean, it's like you should have thought of that, because, considering what had just happened the month before and the fact that the anthrax scare was still going on, it was just too much, and, I wouldn't do that. That was just in poor taste, in my opinion. And, I mean, Halloween, as far as I'm concerned, is meant to be enjoyed as a time to spend time with families and stuff, you know, before the two big holidays here in America being, you know, of course, Thanksgiving and Christmas. You know, it's like, you know, hello. Of course, you know, and I'm not trying to slander this person, I'm not, and it's not intended as such, but, you know, David Scull mentions in his book that, you know, the Reverend Jesse Jackson made a comment in 2001 that, quote, every year we hear about kids getting sick from eating Halloween candy. No. Really? I didn't know. Imagine that. Well, hello, Reverend Jackson. Duh. We know this stuff already. It's called, you know, parents not being responsible for, you know, making their kids stop eating. You know, like Augustus Gloop from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, it's like if you've seen even the Johnny Depp version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Augustus Gloop's a pig. I mean, come on. It's like, you know, kids like that just glut and glut and glut and glut and glut on candy. Of course they get sick. Duh. Hello. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, my parents rationed it out. I mean, like they said, okay, you can have X amount of candy and that's it tonight. And then we would actually put the candy in the refrigerator downstairs. And, you know, we would actually, when I was a kid, my siblings and I, we would get up old pillowcases and we'd fill the pillowcases up, and then what my parents would do is get like one of those clear bins, you know, like Tupperware bins that were kind of big. They're like maybe that big, you know, without the lid on them. What they do is they pour the candy into the bucket, and then like we would go through and check it all, and then, you know, they'd put the lid on there and they would ration it out, which I think is a great idea. I mean, because that worked out just fine for us. We never had a problem. And as a matter of fact, and this is a side note, I actually made one bucket of candy from like one year when I went trick-or-treating last like 3 years. I'm serious, we kept it refrigerated and it took me 3 years to eat it. That's how much candy I got. You know, I mean, really. I mean, like I really rationed it out. I didn't eat that much, you know, back then. Well, anyway, I want to pause here because I got some other stuff I want to talk about. Another video that is Halloween related, but not related to candy and, you know, people being dysfunctional about phone calls and terrorist attacks and everything like that, okay? So, hang on.